So, you know,
I mean, I don't know,
baptism
the
by
Brits
fire.
don't do it much better, so um,
Yeah.
stories I hear.
Jenzo, that was intelligent. Writers always say the most intelligent things. We have just gone live, everyone. My name is Troy
Awesome.
Myers. I'm a graduate of the Stonecrest MFA in creative writing. Last January, in the midst of the pandemic and that isolation, my classmate and colleague and I, Amanda Plow, started a reading series most Sunday nights for alumni and sometimes faculty or special guests in the Stonecrest program. So it has been a fantastic journey. We have met amazing people. I have two friends here I have not met before and one returning. Morgan, you've been with us before. How long ago was that? Not too long.
No, I think maybe 4 or 5 months ago.
Okay.
No, maybe not that long. No, maybe like 3 months.
Okay. And you've had a lot of good news lately in your writing life. You've won a big award and someone's picked up your manuscript. So we can't wait to hear about that. And I've just met Jenzo and Natalie. Natalie, as you will all tell as soon as she speaks, is from the United Kingdom and is now in New Jersey. And Natalie moved here for work, right? And also do an MFA in your spare time.
All of that spare time.
Yeah, that has got to be hard with a full-time job to get a degree and then to pursue a writer's life. So welcome. We're truly glad you're here. And Jenzo, we haven't talked too much. Where are you? What state are you in? Why'd you pick Stonecrest? What brings you here?
Well, first I'd like to say thank you for having me, but
Absolutely.
I like to think that Stonecrest picked me just because Morgan told me about the series and how wonderful it was and gave me a little nudge. He knows that I love to read. But I am currently in Brooklyn. I've been living in New York City for about 5 years now. I moved here to get my MFA from Brooklyn College a few years ago. And I currently work full time, but still, dabble with writing and so forth. But hoping to try to sell a collection in the spring with my agent.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And while I have the floor, I'll just briefly plug myself. I'm sorry, but I was recently in the Best American Short Stories 2021, and that's
wow! Congratulations.
My big thing. Thank you so much.
But thing. Now, did you see an MFA from? You did not go to Stonecrest, or you did?
I did not. I went to Brooklyn College.
You are our first special guest, Jenzo.
Yes. I'm flattered. Thank you.
Good for you. Well, we're honored to have you with a story in Best American Short Stories. That is quite an achievement. So we have 3 illustrious readers tonight. I will start in just a minute. I always take a moment to say hi to my mom, who watches the next morning on the recording, and to Amanda's mom, who also watches, and to my niece, who was going to read a poem tonight, but couldn't. I'm staying at my brother's house. And to all those watching, family and friends, and Stonecrest folks, welcome so much. So glad you're here. So our first reader tonight is Jenzo. You volunteered to go first, and we'll bring you up.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Troy, and everyone for being here. I'm going to be reading from, I'm sorry, were you going to introduce me?
I was. I just disappeared. So just 30 seconds. So so again, you went to different MFA. You know Morgan from how?
Through Shenandoah. I am currently an editorial fellow, and we were just connected through an event. He was hosting a panel with the Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance and invited me to come along. And
fantastic. And I don't know, what is Shenandoah?
It's another literary magazine out of Washington Lee University.
Okay, great. I'm starting to work out, so I was looking for places. One of my best friends, kind of my surrogate father, went to Washington Lee back in the 60s. So he has a lot of great stories. Well, Jenzo, we're so glad you're here, and we want to hear what you've got. What are you going to read for us tonight?
I'm going to read from my short story that recently debuted, a narrative backstage. It's called Poppy. It's a adaptation of Great Falls by Richard Ford, and it's just kind of my bilingual Colombian American take on that. So.
Good for you. I read Rock Springs back in grad school when he was hardly known. So fantastic. Glad you're here. The time's all yours. Let's hear what you brought.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. So yeah, as I said, it debuted in a narrative, and we'll hopefully be moving to the homepage soon, but I just wanted to just quickly give some context. It's a story about masculinity and fatherhood in the Latinx community. It also grapples with themes of anti-Blackness in the Latinx community. And I just, for kind of a disclaimer, I use some racial epithets in my writing, and I just wanted to be kind of putting that, for your awareness and so forth in terms of the content. Anyway, but I'll get started. Thank you again. Every time I tell this story, I want it to be about how not all men have a price. That when in the thick of it, with his back against the wall, in a word, bien jodido, a man doesn't give in. But my papi wasn't a telenovela wetback, didn't have hazel eyes or a strong jaw like Garcia Bernal, the kind that made panties drop. He was one of those stout mulattoes who knew his place from a young age. Self-diagnosed más negro que negroid, was prone to patting his pockets when we passed Black people on the sidewalk, even though his mom's was darker than the coffee beans he helped her pick as a kid. And all of that was a symptom, really, of the emasculation, of the names his own papi called him growing up, of the challenge inherited by all who leave their native land and take those first dusty steps into los Estados Unidos, only to arrive below average height, below average worth. In effect, even when he stood proud, papi was a little too close to the ground. Still, he spun it to his advantage and justified the paisa sway. You know the one I'm talking about. You've seen it down in Pilsen, or up at Rogers Park, or wherever it is that the Spigs congregate in your area. Pelvis first, legs wide apart, that back and forth with the hairy forearms to assert dominance, a sort of weighted dance. Many of the old school immigrants can be identified by that swagger. Papi was no different, except he wasn't very tall, not even by Colombian standards. What he did have, however, were big balls. Grandísimos, he would specify. How big, some chubby kid from the crowd gathered on our stoop would dare to ask. Muy big, es super big. You lie, puras mentiras. Papi held one hand up to God. Ask me vieja. Sometimes I need help, ¿sabes? Demasiado big. And he would exaggerate trying to take them out, straining himself. Show us, they begged. A ver esos big balls, Lucho. Papi never did. He might have been macho, but he wasn't pendejo. Flashing his balls to an audience, even an eager one, was asking to be deported. But the scene repeated itself when I was a boy, the locals showing up with cans of Old Style and their children, my papi talking his talk. The big balls had slowed him down his whole life. That's why it took him so long to start school. He had to get used to them dragging behind. Never mind when hopping the border, how it pained him to sprint across the desert highway, those fat balls chafing the entire way. Even my mom's bought into it a little. On occasion, when he'd say, ask me vieja, my mom's would come out of her cave, still in a nightgown and chanclas, even shorter than he was, and confirm the story. Doña, you hear the lies he says. Es la verdad, she would smile, a tender hand on my old man's back. Son muy big. And the Spics, they couldn't take it. Ay, doña, don't lie para su hombre. It's a sin. Como unos huevos prehistóricos, she added. My papi was 50 shades of brown. Born Luis Ospina, he went by Lucho with his intimates and Louis Hernandez, the name he bought, with the rest. His first job was at a paper factory near O'Hare Airport, 2 trains and a bus from where I was raised in Irving Park. Every day he worked the floor there with other starry-eyed Spics, minding the machines and ignoring his frozen balls. In the beginning, my papi befriended one of them, a young guy from Ecuador who shared his camels and lasted only a few shifts before disappearing. Papi had taken to the guy. He liked to tell him about football or La Feria de Cali as they worked the wet end and tried not to inhale bleach fumes. Where's Carlos? Papi asked the day he vanished. Who? Ecuadorian, Papi said. He held a hand above his head. This tall. Smokes. The others shook their heads. Gone. Gone? Back home. The foreman arrived and broke up their conversation. Chop, chop. The paper wasn't going to make itself. Less speaky, more worky. The only reason he didn't fire anyone was because they came cheap. Papi hated that job, and at the first chance, he got out. When my mom's crossed El Caribe to join him, my papi had already landed himself a gig in a Mexican restaurant called Mateo's. I loved Mateo's. Some of my best memories are passing out in my mom's lap after filling up on Shirley Temples and quesadillas at Mateo's, Friday nights, the manager would hire a mariachi band, and I swear, it was like these guys were playing for their citizenship. Even my papi would stop and listen before running off to refill waters or make some table their change. I miss Mateos. Ya no está. Matter of fact, the whole block is gone. We got a Chipotle on that corner now. Those quesadillas aren't as good. My mom's was a pretty woman, flaca, with black hair and thick lips that hid her crooked teeth in photos. She had grown up in Cali and got more schooling than my papi, but not what anyone would have called enough. They met during La Feria de Cali, where papi won her over with his super salsa skills, his proximity to the ground good for something at last. She was older than he was, and followed him, she told me, because he was full of life and didn't want to settle for what he'd been given. Because he was puro campesino, but to him, America wasn't so far that they couldn't go see it, which, in my papi's defense, they did. That was what she was looking for. And papi gave it to her, maybe too fast, before my moms could really ache for more. Then one day I was in the picture. When my old man wasn't working at Mateos, he was heckling pickup football games at Montrose Field with the other neighborhood spics, and he was pretty good at it. Imagine a bunch of immigrants, shirts tucked in, pacing on the grass and throwing up hands when they hear a bad call, swearing like it's El Clásico. There would be beer sold out of a cooler and spoils from the homeland wrapped in foil for $1, deep-fried plantains, pastel de yuca, and greasy empanadas galore. Most of the time it was a harmless boys' club, a way to blow off steam. Still, my moms didn't like me going. No son cosas para niños, she'd said. But papi took me along anyway. I didn't know much then about anything, except that there was weight to that, it being his idea. I was there purely for reinforcement, to warm him if La Policia were spotted on the lakefront, to save his seat while he ducked behind a tree to take a leak. On a given day, papi and I would sit in folding chairs with moist cans pressed to our necks, his an old style and mine a Fanta, both jeering at the refs. Sometimes we'd be part of a larger group, and I could never tell if these were people we knew or just random wetbacks who shared a love of the game. But on the occasion someone approached my papi, they'd exchange a paisa saludo, swaying toward one another until they embraced. I've been around papi when he stopped mid-sentence and turned the sway on, as if two paisas can recognize one another's vibes, even with their backs turned. This happened most with his mustache body Condor, who I really only saw at the fields. After he and my papi did their paisa saludo, Condor would say something like, Junior, ¿qué más?, while tussling my hair, or tell me, saluda tu mamá, which I never did because she clearly didn't like him, and more important, I didn't either. He was a chain smoker, and every part of him reeked, even the inside of his turquoise Jetta, whose smell I dealt with when he gave me and papi rides home. It was during one of these episodes that papi's price came about, but in terms of when, no tengo ni idea. Maybe we had left the fields victorious, or de pronto nos fuimos vencidos. Not that it mattered. My old man and Condor would have been pissed drunk regardless. It isn't legal to drunk drive now, and it wasn't then, but I think Condor almost always did anyway. Era un ladrón. This much I knew before my moms even said so, because he carried loose laptops and DVD players in the back of his car. That night ride, he and papi were trading a flask back and forth when Condor asked me, his eyes meeting mine in the rear view, Junior, ¿qué significa NBA? I don't know, I admitted from behind him, seatbeltless. Negros bien altos, he wheezed, laughing so hard that the Jetta stalled. We jerked forward suddenly, and I remember the sound of papi's swears, the clacking plastic from the trunk behind me. Finally, papi said, Idiota, él ni siquiera habla bien. Mentiras, said Condor. Él entiende. Right, mijo? And it was true. I understood more than papi ever realized. That might have been why they talked business as we pulled up to our apartment, despite Condor's protests. Even when Condor opened the door for him and said it could wait for another time, papi was adamant, rambling. He was retired, wasn't he? Men like him had already paid their dues to get to the States. And reminiscing with his old crowd at the lake was one thing, but now the family called, saying he should visit a boss about some new offer. But papi didn't have to go, right? Hadn't he shown time and time again, in this or any land, that his balls were the biggest, that he did what he had to until he decided he didn't? Of course papi had, said Condor. He was the Lucho Ospina. And Ospinas did not back down. Tampoco los Condores, not until they feasted on the flesh of their dead prey. But Papi lost nothing by going, and in fact, refusing after hearing the offer instead of before only proved that he had the biggest balls of all. Tú y yo, he hiccuped, a hand on my Papi's shoulder. Somos guerreros. Guerreros, Papi repeated, nodding like he understood. Warriors. Condor knew how to provoke my old man, how to soothe his nerves. He could talk him in and out of fights without breaking a sweat, without lifting a hand. And so I see it clearly, how they stumbled onto the grass, the Jenna's engine still running, although I can't picture when we all got out of the car. But even without the details, the image stays seared in my brain. Condor and Papi whooping in the moonlight as their hips swayed at each other. Just two grown men, keeping time with guacharaca rasps only they could hear, shameless, before they collapsed on the ground for all eyes to see. It was in early July. I remember because I was out of school and saw the city covered in American flags. They were hanging from apartment windows and porch railings. Wherever I looked, it was stars and stripes. In every corner store, on every bank window, it was all rojo, blanco, y azul. Even we had one on display somewhere around the house, though Papi made sure my mom's hung the Colombian flag next to it just a little higher. That day, me and Papi didn't take our usual route to the fields. Normally, we walked to Montrose Ave and then a bus down to the lake, carrying our folding chairs with us. Instead, when we got to the bus stop, Papi walked into the Brown Line station and paid our fare. A train was leaving the station, and before I could ask, we were on it. I have meeting, he said. Muy importante. There was something about carrying the folding chairs on the train that felt different from carrying them on the bus. Papi made it worse. When we got off to transfer, he grabbed mine and said, son basura, before throwing them in the trash. Se perdieron en el parque, okay? And what could I say? It was the truth. They lost themselves. I had never taken the Pink Line before, but was more or less aware of Little Village. We had some familia in the area, and once while visiting my cousins, we passed by the Cook County Jail. Beyond the wired fences and swarms of security, I could tell what it was, just by the way it made us feel. My youngest cousin wet his pants. I mean, he was little, but even they can sense those things. Papi not so much took, but dragged me towards the visitor's entrance, and I was too anxious to look at anything but his shoes. He had changed them on the train, and these were his nicest pair, better than his Sunday best. Real leather, new polish, bien hechos, had a nice clop-clop. I remember them catching the overhead lights as we waited for the metal detector, as we were led around the facility. When I finally peeked up from them, I felt that something was different about Papi. His sway had disappeared. He now walked with purpose. There was a single seat on our side of the glass, so I had to half sit on Papi's lap. A guard came over and explained that the inmate was allowed only one visitor at a time. Dígale que es su tío, Papi whispered. He's my uncle, sir. Hace mucho tiempo que no lo ve. I haven't seen him in months. Llore. I hesitated. After years of getting my ass beat for crying, and then crying for getting my ass beat, I just couldn't make sense of that. Llore, mijo, he repeated. And it clicked. The tears began to fall as I said, please, sir. I was allowed to stay. The man on the other side of the glass looked impressed by the show, even winked at us before grabbing his receiver. He was much older than my Papi. I could tell by the gray at his temples and how much it made his orange jumpsuit pop. I had never seen him before, but it was clear from the way they joked with each other that they were familiar. Papi was always friendlier in Spanish, had more to say. Sooner or later, Papi told the man, I would outgrow him. At this rate, I'd be a basketball star someday. There was pretty good money in that, even if I had to play with the blacks, they agreed. Junior, the man said, tapping at the glass. Remember me? I shook my head no. It's me, Tío Oscar. I didn't have it, Tío Oscar. Left and right during my childhood, it was Junior, soy tu hermano, tu primo, tu tío. As a kid, I couldn't keep track of who I was actually related to. It wasn't until I got older that I found out the fields were a meeting ground for delincuentes. As he was getting into screaming matches with my moms, Papi didn't name the spics he surrounded himself with for what they were: thieves, cheats, narcos. Even when he was too smacked to not hit us, my old man wouldn't back down until my mom said it back to him. Repeat after me. These people were the one constant, the one thing we could count on from the homeland. Family. He's timid, Papi said to fill the silence. Like his mother. Tio Oscar laughed. Back then I was so nervous I studied Papi's shoes and tried hard to disappear. In between the words I didn't even know in English and their Colombian slang, I barely grasped that they were talking about a deal. It was only later, after what happened with my mom's in Condor, that I was able to piece together the facts. Tio Oscar wanted Papi to come out of retirement, to move us to a house in the suburbs. All Papi had to do while living there was let freight trucks pick up and drop off cocaine shipments from the garage, and the family would take care of the rest. It was easy money if we did what we should. The schools are good there, Tio Oscar said. Maybe Junior tries for basketball next year. You know I'm grateful for the opportunity, Oscar. Consider it a gift. But this is risky. Lucho, I'm disappointed. Risk-taking is what got us here. I took a risk pulling you out of coffee fields and into business. And look, Tio Oscar said, arching his eyebrows at me, how well that turned out. Papi was about to answer, but then I shifted my weight and whispered, asking whether I could really get to play basketball if we moved. See, even Junior likes the idea. Papi and I exchanged the look we always did when I blurted things out. He sighed and said, my woman would kill me. She doesn't want us involved in this kind of thing anymore. Tio Oscar spoke evenly. Lucho, who orders in your house? Her or you? I do. And who made that house? I did. Wrong, said Tio Oscar. We did. The family did. My old man, as estúpido as he looked with me in his lap, wasn't dumb enough to say the wrong thing. Papi opened his mouth to speak, but then the guard cut him off, saying, Hernandez, 2 minutes. I heard a sudden light knocking and looked up. Tio Oscar was rapping his knuckles, gesturing that he wanted me to come closer. I slid off Papi's leg to do so. He said, tell your Papi, have some balls. Papi made no sign that I shouldn't. Have some balls, I mumbled to him. Papi stayed quiet as Tio Oscar chuckled and gave me a fist bump through the glass between us. Good boy, he said as I retreated to Papi's lap. You know, he takes after you, Lucho. Follows orders. Papi shook his head. Those born here are lazy, and those not are stubborn, Tio Oscar said as 2 guards appeared. He nodded while they placed him in handcuffs as they pulled him to his feet. Tio Oscar pointed his lips to the receiver, and then one of the guards held it up to his mouth. Lucho, think about it. For history's sake. I will, Papi said as we stood from the booth. Genial. Ciao, Junior, he called back, smiling as they led him away. Ciao, Tio, I echoed. Later, on the train ride home, Papi changed back into his normal shoes, the ones covered in stains with the beat-up leather that he wore at Mateo's. He said not to tell my moms where we had been. He made me promise as the train slowed to a stop. Quiero oírlo. I promise. En español. Lo juro, Papi. Good boy, he said as we exited, and I noticed the swing had returned to his waist. And that's where I'll pause for now. Thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity.
Jenzo, that was immaculate and sparkling fiction.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Seriously, below average height, below average work. And I'd love any story about big balls. Like I have, there's a lack of those in the canon. Beautiful, beautiful family story. Is some of that, I'm assuming some of that's autobiographical, or is that just all fiction?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I people are like, you know, how much of these stories is about you, or like, what are your stories about? And about me and my family, and you know, they're a significant source of inspiration. But you know, you got to embellish and blur the lines and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is the big ball thing true? Did you know someone who actually bragged like that about that?
I mean, it's I think it's a common thing, kind of just in Latin masculinity that comes up is yeah. There's like big huevos, right, or like huevon as like a word that is used depending on, you know, dialects get crazy, but like it can be positive, it can be negative. But yeah, there's certainly a fixation, I would say, in some.
It was an extraordinary, I want to say, symbol, metaphor, reference point in your story handled so skillfully and also sweetly. So thank you so much for coming, Ginger. We'd love to have you back. And I'm glad Morgan brought you aboard. So if you stick around, if you can, at the end, we'll all come back on and say goodbye.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm so thrilled to have been invited, and I relish a chance to read. So thanks so much. And I can't wait to hear everything else.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. Hey, everyone. If you're just joining, my name is Troy Myers. I'm a graduate of the Sunkus MFA in Creative Writing at the University of Southern Maine. And on most Sunday nights, my colleague and I, Amanda Plow, host a reading series for alumni, faculty, and special guests, as Jenzo DuQue, special guest, to read in a very friendly sort of family environment atmosphere. So our next reader is a Stonecoast graduate. Her name is Natalie Harris-Spencer. Natalie, you out there?
Hey, I'm here.
Hey, Natalie, great to see you. And you are a somewhat recent immigrant to the United States.
3.5 years. So.
Yeah, big 3.5 years, of course. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. Now, you have a career in web design or
digital marketing. Yeah, that's right.
Digital marketing. Like that's all I know about any. I did my best.
It comes in handy with, launching author websites and that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sure eventually you have the best website around as a writer. But what led you to pursue a career also in fiction? That's fascinating.
Yeah, so I've always written and have been part of writing groups. And when I was in London, I went regularly for many years and kind of figured, hey, I've been writing all these scenes and these scenes have kind of come together and I guess I have a novel. And when I moved here, it just skyrocketed. I joined Stonecoast, have just been writing so much more than I had when I was in England, and got an agent and have been writing psychological suspense novels. So that's kind of my jam, although what I'm going to read tonight is not that. So
I love that. Psychological suspense. Good for you.
Thank you.
You said you're going to read 3. What are you reading tonight? Tell us what.
Yeah, so I have 3 flash stories. If I have time, I'll read all 3. If not, I'll stop at 2. And these 3 are either forthcoming or have just been published. And one actually just won a prize. So yeah, I'm excited to read them. They're quite different. Each one is different. So I'm gonna read those. And yeah, I just wanted to say thanks really so much for having me. And I think the great thing with Flash is it is my kind of relief from the longer form, which can be so all-consuming.
Yes.
But Flash, for anyone who doesn't know, is 1,000 words or less. So I prefer it to poetry because you have a little bit more room to breathe, but you're still trying to convey an awful lot in a very tight space.
Yes, I can't wait to hear these stories. So Amanda's going to share all the information where they're published and the award you won, the Hummingbird Flash Fiction, which is a great name for a flash fiction. But it is your time, Natalie. Let's hear what you brought. We're excited to hear your stories.
Thank you so much. So the first one I'm going to read is a little bit more genre and maybe a bit more up my street because I like writing creepy, twisty stuff. So this one is going to be published on the Dark Sire literary magazine in January. This one is called Porch Swing. I inherit the house with the wraparound lemonade porch from my dead pappy. The bequest comes as a bit of a shock. I haven't visited him since 2 Christmases ago, stopped calling by the hospice, but he stutters his dying wish to a bedside stranger that I should be the grandchild who gets the house. It takes me less than a week to pack up my boxy apartment into 2 wheelie suitcases and invade the empty rooms. The whole house smells of mildew and tobacco of him, thick like a cigar cloud clinging. I crinkle my nose, disgusting habit. His shabby sweaters and crisp slacks are still hanging in the armoire waiting to be worn. Outside, I breathe easier. There's something about the romance of this porch scene that deeply appeals. A rocking chair, a page turner, a glass of white summer wine. The porch is huge. 6 symmetrical pillars support the ivy-cloaked veranda. On the southwest side, a porch swing flanked by iron chairs is mounted to the shiplap. The bench has warped over time. It rises ever so gradually at the sides, like it's grinning. I take a salad bowl of sweet potatoes outside to peel on my lap. I bring wine. The chains squeak, clogged up with rust as I rock to and fro, to and fro. It hasn't held human weight in a while. I hum, inhaling the evening, rocking, humming and peeling, taking in the clingy scent of evergreen. I gaze at Pappy's chopping shed, Pappy's beat up, burnt orange canoe, Pappy's little rowboat bobbing in the dock. The sky is turning lavender across the lake. I'm one lucky bastard, I think, smiling at Pappy overhead, the wine warming. With one lazy slip, I carve a groove into my thumb, speckling blood all over my sweet potatoes, streaks of red on amber. I curse, flap my injured hand like a mad bird, throw down the bowl, the knife lodged inside the flesh of one potato, and scurry inside in search of a band-aid. I'm washing the blood in the kitchen sink, the red dribbling, when I see that there's a child in my porch swing seat. He's sitting cross-legged, his back to me, quite still. It's a tiny back, sharp wing bones plainly protruding from beneath a cotton shirt, maybe a school uniform. Hey, I yell through the window, hey! He doesn't turn. Quite startled, I dash onto the porch. Freeze. Cold blood fills my stomach. His shape is all wrong. It reminds me of a portobello mushroom, heavy-topped, slim-stemmed. There's a mushroomy colour that surrounds him too, a dirty taupe, an earthiness. A mushroomy texture? No, is that right? All white and fleshy, yet strangely indistinct. A kind of fog around his flesh, like someone scribbled his outline and the rest hasn't been properly filled in. He starts to cough. Then the creep of a new smell, not pines or cigars, something putrid, worse than earthy. I lurch back, clapping my hand to prevent it crawling into my mouth. He coughs again and the swing begins to rock. Why is the swing rocking? The boy isn't moving at all, but the swing is rocking. It gathers momentum without a driver, without force, to and fro and up and up. He's much too tiny to make it move on its own. And yet, it goes. The chains don't squeak as before. They groan against something far more colossal, far heavier than this indeterminate infant weight. My mouth turns dry as I note a different sound to the groaning and coughing, a kind of slithering, like something being slowly dragged along, no, up the wall. And I see now that the child has somehow illogically leapt from the chair and is now upon the siding of the house, Puppy's house, no, my house, like smoke rising, his grey back to me all the while. I steady myself, blink. My palm slips against a cool porch pillar, yet I can't seem to extract my other hand from the horrible shape my mouth is making. I let out not a scream, but a kind of vibrating "ah" from between my fingers. The empty swing pushes up, still groaning. Like the swift slide of a chess piece, the child has advanced to the ceiling, is perpendicular to it, but is sticking there, attached, not falling, quite upside down. With some massive effort, I find a way to move my legs, crouch down, grope for the peeling knife. The swing executes one final push, its empty bench at the most unnatural of angles, the curved smile of the seat transformed into a precipitous frown. Through the slats, one cloudy eyeball swells. I launch the knife. I think I must have dozed off from the Sauvignon Blanc because the sky is dark now, far darker than before, and I'm back, sitting on the swing, bowl of sweet potatoes positioned tidily on my lap. Something curious about my hair. My ponytail is loose. It's hanging in limp strands. I look down at my feet on the ceiling. The swing is reversed, its chains attached to the floor, its bench almost touching the roof of the veranda. I'm not supported by anything, yet I'm not falling either. I see land first. My land, my shed, my canoe, my boat, then the rippling lake and sky, a vast eggplant sky, mine consuming the bulk of the flipped scene before me. I try to open my mouth, but I'm unnaturally rigid. I smell the acidic assault of cigar smoke. A cough, this time from far below, from the rot of the earth. The child is looking up at me from my porch, and from behind a thickening smoke, from a face so ashen that it looks like it's been draped in a web of bloodless capillaries, he is smoking a cigar, grinning. You're in my seat, wheezes the boyish voice of my grey, long-dead pappy. Okay, changing the pace a bit. So this next piece I'm going to read, this one was actually the winner of the 2021 Hummingbird Flash Fiction Prize, which was such an honour. I've never won anything ever before for my writing, and after I graduated, I made it my goal not just to get published, but to win a prize or award. So I entered a bunch of competitions, and I was so happy and thrilled and honoured to win this one. And I think this might be, so as you might have been able to tell from the piece I just read, I tend to write kind of more genre suspense, but I think this one I'm about to read is probably the most, I guess, traditional literary thing that I've ever written. Yeah, I hope you enjoy it. The Art of Ironing. Some flat afternoons, I can smell the starch from my childhood. It comes to me on accident, the high whiff of linen on the bend of a washing line, the dense threat of rain overhead. With this smell, I'm 14 again, back in my parents' house, miles and miles away, watching my mother do the ironing. There's a shut glass door between us, between which exists a green dome terrarium. I peer through the glassy orb at my mother, a distortion. She's a rainforest mirage, her mechanical ironing arm, slick hot and hazy. My mother irons things that don't need ironing, hankies, socks, sheets. There's no art to what she's doing, this procedural flattening of creases, this daily smushing. I think she must really love the monotony of ironing. You'd have to love something that pointless that much. Other things need ironing. I have a pile of ironing, she laments, akin to a pile of dirt or a pile of bodies, and she really does. My brother's football shorts, my father's work shirts. She has a way with the limbs, rotating them so it's like the board is wearing them. She wriggles the head between the little buttons around the waistbands. The iron moans with the work. I'm telling you, it isn't art. Mum, I say, eager, I made up a dance in school. Do you want to see? Later, I have a pile of ironing. I dance alone in the lounge. One morning, I sneak the iron for my own dirty purposes. I press my cheek to the board, edging the metal as near to my skull as I dare, an acrid smell spitting from my hair. I lift up, tingling. The straightening hasn't worked too well. The ends fray in mad sprigs and the roots retain their curls. Still, I look a little bit more like her, presentable. I will her to notice, patting at my do. But no words of approval come. Instead, the persistent hiss of steam. I hate the iron. I hate its pointless swerve, the erasure. But most of all, I hate how it's a dirty thief, how it hoodwinked my mother, claiming all those afternoons from me before my father got home from work. Not now, love. I have a pile of ironing and dinner to make before Dad gets home. I watch her guide the shipshape, the prow of the metal. I note the occasional crackle of days-old water as it hits the scalding plane. She insists on folding the sheets, creating senseless dents. It's the sheets that get me the most. Her not artwork ruined by the dent of a shoulder or the turn of a knee. I destroy her work as I lash out in my sleep. Yellow cells, leaking cells, shedding, blood seeping. I knuckle rub the muddy stains in secret, the smell like a wet coin. Then I bury them in the wicker basket ahead of the next cycle, almost wishing she finds them, craving the confrontation. I feel sorry for the sheets. They're getting ironed again. My mother has that look about her, a narrowing storm. One day, my mother burns my favourite skirt that she finds too revealing, lifts its alien silver fabric between pinched fingers, her front teeth clamped over her bottom lip as if to say, not my fault, the iron made me do it. The imprint resembles a muddy boot, the strange kick of it. I bite back kiddish tears. I love that skirt. When a boy finally lies next to me on those sheets, I think, yes, that'll learn you. My mother doesn't mention when they go missing. She simply replaces them, a higher cotton count, neatly plastic wrapped in poppers. I shake the corners furiously, an expulsion of invisible bedbugs. Mum? Yes, love? What happened to the sheets? I'm provoking her. We both know it. What sheets? I can't wait to stain them again, to show her how grown up I am. Today, over the phone, I tease my mother with kindness about the ironing, its artlessness, about how she was back then. You're obsessed, I accuse. Who irons sheets anyway? We laugh in unison, one mother to another. 20 years later, and it's still easier to tease than tell the truth. And then finally, I have a piece that's just for fun. So I wrote this piece about cats. Frankly, I don't think there are enough flash stories about cats, and writers bloody love cats. So here is a piece about a cat. And this one was published on Bright Flash Literary Review about a month ago. From home. Now that I'm working from home, he doesn't leave me alone. Most mornings, right before my alarm shrieks, he slips under with me. His cue is my unconscious shift to the fetal position, my crunch beneath the comforter. I pat the pillow and he comes, rests his dainty little chin on my forearm. To touch, he's soft and hard, a world of internal organs and skeleton beneath. I trail my fingers to feel his xylophone spine, counting bone by bone. He vibrates like the fur of a bee, animal heart kicking. He exhales, opens a rosebud mouth filled with milky teeth, makes a sound like, eh. His fur smells of the comfort of clean linen and faintly sweet of sweat. We doze like that until the third snooze button. He follows me into the bathroom, hovers by the cold tap. He's somewhat of a sloppy drinker. Pearls of water drip from his mouth, cling to his whiskers like condensation on grass. I kick him out while I shower. He wails for 20 human minutes, wanting in, craving nearness. Then, to spite me, he hides. I make coffee, turn on my laptop, move my mouse a bit. He stalks downstairs. No rush, just to check I've topped his biscuits, sniffing slow blinks into the cool morning. He follows the sun around the house. Internet superstar that he is, he brushes across my work video meetings, tail following in an open parenthesis. It sweeps my face like you might swish a red feather across a lover's cheek. I scoop him two-handed and drape him over my shoulder as if to burp a baby. Excuse this little guy, I say, apologetic. But I shouldn't apologize because look how cute. Sometimes I wave his paw at the screen, say hi. Arrogance or maybe irritation at being paraded makes him scramble down my back like it's a humpback bridge. He meanders off in disgust. It's at times like these I think we'd both prefer me back at the office. When he's not sleeping like a cinder block in one of his usual spots, I've trained him to nutmeg, that neat little soccer trick. He careens between my legs in exchange for shrimpy shrimp temptations. Our record is 24 nutmegs in a row. Champion, he bathes in glory on the rug, making himself extra long, his white tummy visible, rolling. His ears are always colder than the rest of him. They feel like petals between padded thumbs. Whenever my hands approach, he'll take a cheeky lick, seeking remnants of his favourites. Perfume, mayonnaise, hairspray. At 3 p.m, he moves to the window by my desk. He bleats at birds while I'm emailing. He yowls as he bounds downstairs at the sound of a car alarm. I keep the camera on him if I'm forced to leave the house. Required surveillance, and my app shows me that he cries. It's nothing human, but there's a sob in its timbre. The worst sound he's ever made was 2 years ago when he fell behind the bookcase and lodged his sparrow ribs against the bricks. The sound was ghastly, far too loud, like a siren passing too close. Are you okay? Are you going to be okay? I demand that he tells me. Sometimes he gets really mad at me. He leaves a dirty protest to one side of his litter tray. I ask him what's wrong, scratch his neck. He jerks away, suddenly shy, ashamed of the stains he's left behind. He's an exhibitionist. Legs erect like sticks, licks without giving two shits. He's performing to me, his audience of one, a dead theatre. He is constantly in search of my lap and wonders where it goes when I get up. He sits and watches me from afar while I eat dinner, eager for scraps. But what he really wants is for me to move the bean tray from my knees so he can nuzzle in for Netflix. Time to go up, I say aloud, and he understands, not the words or language, but the fact that I'm the person saying the words and language, and I head up to bed and he always, always follows. He might not be a person, but that doesn't make him any less living. Thank you.
Natalie, you were correct when you said you had breadth in those stories, 3 very different topics. The Art of Ironing was beautiful. What I consider your ghost story, the first story, what was the title of that again?
Porch swing.
Porch swing. That scared the crap out of me. Like,
Oh, good.
we just heard a story about someone named Poppy, and then you come on and Poppy's a ghost.
I know. I didn't want to say.
I think it's hard to write ghost imagery. I don't know how to say it, well. But man, that was psychedelic. That was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to read it. And yeah, I, like Jenzo, like to write as many different things as possible and experiment with different things. And I just think Flash is a great medium to try a bunch of different styles out and keep it short and sweet.
Well, you achieved in all 3 of those stories. Thank you for sharing those so much, Natalie.
Thank you, Troy.
You bet. Everyone, tonight we have one more reader. This is a Sunday night edition of the Stonehouse Reader Series for friends, alumni, and the Stone Coast program at the University of Southern Maine. Our last reader is returning to us. His name is Morgan Talty. Morgan, are you out there?
I am.
Good to see you. Now, Morgan, you were here just a few weeks or months ago and read for us. And what have you been up to since? You've had some pretty good news lately.
Yeah, I've won some awards, have some stories coming out. But the big thing is my story collection from Tin House is going to be out on July 5th, 2022. The cover was revealed via LitHub 2 weeks ago, I think. I just shared a link to Tin House in the book and where you can pre-order it and stuff in the chat. So maybe Amanda can post that somewhere. But yeah, I've just been teaching, reading, writing, and yeah, pretty much those 3 things in all different orders.
Well, congratulations on the success. And thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming back now that you've achieved so much prominence.
Yeah, thank you, Troy.
You're very welcome. We enjoyed you last time. What are you going to share with us tonight, Morgan?
So I'm going to read a story from my collection. It's called The Blessing Tobacco, and it came out in Tri-Quarterly magazine, I think in winter 2020.
Great.
That may be right. Yeah. But it's in my collection. And I'm not going to be able to get through the entire piece, probably like half of it. So hopefully it leaves people on a cliffhanger and they're like, well, now I have to go buy the book. So yeah, I'm going to read that. And before I dive in, I just want to thank you, Troy and Amanda and Natalie and Jenzo for a great evening.
Thank you, Morgan. The time's all yours. Let's hear what you have.
Awesome. Thank you. The Blessing Tobacco. Grammy slid the pack of Misty 100s across the kitchen table. Under the ceiling light, the age spots on the back of her hand looked like sprinkles of dirt, and like the dirt, the age spots hadn't always been there. Help yourself to a smoke, Robbie, Grammy said. I'll make us some coffee. Grammy was sick. Not cough sick, the way some old people got before they slid over to the other side like a pack of smokes. Well, maybe she was cough sick, but not in her lungs. The cough came from her brain, from below the soft gray stuff, burrowed deep in tissue, something tickling her there in an indescribable way. And like a thick hacking chest cough, the one from Grammy's brain was bad. Go on, Robbie, Grammy said. She poured water into the coffee maker and then dumped the old coffee grounds into the wastebasket with a thump. The lighter's in my purse. I dragged the pack to me, the back of my hand dirtless. With my fingernails, I pulled out the cigarette. It smelled like mint and was longer than my fingers. When I put it between my lips, it dangled there, the tip of the cigarette so far away. Robbie, Grammy said, I know you do it. Mom knows you do it. The lighter's in my purse, but please don't get me in trouble. Grammy went to the fridge and opened it. Robbie had been Grammy's little brother, and he'd been dead since before us natives even had rights. I never knew him. To me, he was only a relative who left young and stayed young. Little Robbie, little great Uncle Robbie. He'd been my age, 12, when the river took him, keeping him a little forever. Are you hungry, Grammy said. No, I said. I'm all set, Francis. Mom had sent me down to see if Grammy needed firewood brought in. That was why I was here. And before I left, Mom told me to play along if Grammy's brain coughed. Mom didn't say brain cough, though. She said, David, if Grammy starts up, go with it. Grammy's purse hung on the side of the kitchen chair. With the Misty hanging from my lips, I unzipped her purse and dug through papers, receipts, some braided sweetgrass, loser scratch-off tickets. Dirt in the bottom of her purse lodged itself under my fingernails. The loose change stuck to my hand. 2 times I pulled from the purse what I thought was a lighter, but was actually lipstick and mascara. I took the purse from the chair and set it on the table under the light, and really dug my face in there until I finally found the lighter. A purple Bic. I sat back down, the cigarette filter all wet and slimy and damp in my mouth. The coffee maker gurgled, then steamed and hissed, and finally water tunneled through the fresh grounds and sputtered out and into the stained coffee pot. The lighter warmed the longer I held it, and I wondered how I should smoke or who I should smoke like. I could, maybe, smoke like my sister Paige, cigarette always held close to her face between drags. Or I could smoke like Mom's boyfriend, Frick, take tiny, tiny puffs, but expel the largest of cloud smoke. Then there was Mom, who only lit her cigarette, took 1 drag, and then forgot she even held it until the ash bent and then she flicked it, barely making the ashtray. But then I realized I couldn't smoke the way they did because I was supposed to be Grammy's little brother. Go with it, Mom said in my head. I took the cigarette from my mouth, dried the moist filter as best I could, and then put it back between my lips. As I did with the wood stove at home, I flicked the lighter, except instead of putting flame to birch bark or newspaper, I touched the flame to tobacco. It caught, sizzled, and smoke rose up, stung my eyes. Smoke dived down, burned my throat. Don't cough, I told myself. Don't cough. The coffee maker stopped dripping. And then I coughed, and Grammy laughed. Think you'd be used to it, Grammy said. Mom did say you were digging into the family's blessing tobacco. Said you couldn't catch it, but knew you were doing it. She was talking to Robbie, so I didn't say anything. I tried the cigarette again. It was easier on the throat, but it was still coarse like swallowing sand. Misty's are my favorites, Grammy said. Harsh, but not too harsh. I agree, I said. Grammy laughed. She reached in the cupboard and took down 2 white mugs, red lipstick faintly staining the rims. Sugar? Cream? She said. Both, I told her. She fixed the coffee, set mine in front of me, and took a seat. My ash was getting long, and so I flicked the cigarette over the ashtray. The ashes flung up and over and landed on the other side of the table, and Grammy swiped them to the floor. Grammy lit her own cigarette, took a drag, and set it down on the table, the lit end dangling off. She picked up her coffee, blew on it sharply, and sipped, her eyes on Robbie. I could have smoked more of the cigarette, but I butted it. I didn't even sip my coffee twice before Grammy offered me another Misty. Go on, she said. Help yourself. I'm okay, I said. My throat hurt. No, she said. Please, have another. That's okay, Frances. Really, I told her. Grammy sipped her coffee and then set the mug down. Have another, she said. By the 7th cigarette, I realized Grammy was setting Robbie up. I was sitting in that chair, watching Grammy grow angrier and angrier with Robbie, forcing cigarette after cigarette on him. Smoke another, she said after I butted each one. I was being stubborn. I could have run home at any time, but I stayed until my body couldn't take it anymore, until my head was banging and banging, until the coffee acid in my stomach begged to rise up and out. I don't know how many I smoked, but finally I shot up, the chair tipping over, and I bolted for the door. That'll teach you to steal the blessing tobacco, Grammy said as I ran out the door. Down the road, I dry heaved into some brush. My knees shook and my eyes watered. Everything was blurry. I weaved into the woods, split through sharp pine branches, stopping to lean on an oak every so often to try and puke before bobbing and bobbing, branches scratching my skin, farther and farther from Grammy's house. On the riverbank, my knees in mud, I tried to throw up but could not. It just wouldn't come. It was in there. So much was deep down in there, but it would not come, would not rise up. I burped and gagged and burped, but only saliva dripped from my mouth, sending ripples through the river when it hit, making it harder to see in the brown water what it looked like. But there was no telling. The water was too dark. Dragonfly nymphs scuttled by, and water bugs glided on the water. I was thirsty, but the river was a brown, watery grit, filled with poison from the mill up north that sent down wads of pink and shit-colored bubbles that eventually dumped out into Penobscot Bay. I needed a drink, so I cupped my hands and dipped in, and I slurped the water. It tasted fine, but it still sickened me. I tried to throw up once more, but I couldn't, and I almost fell into the river. Had to catch myself, hands all muddy. Before standing, I splashed water on my face. My headache was fading, but that nausea in my gut was trapped. I hurried back through the woods, hoping I didn't look ill, hoping I looked fine. Excuses are easier if you look fine. At home, Frick was outside under the hood of his gray truck, swearing, and I ran past him and up the cement steps and through the back door. Mom was where I'd last seen her, at the kitchen sink with a bottle of Connoisseur's silver jewelry cleaner, freshening what she hoped to sell at the pawn shop in Overtown where Paige worked, and the smell of that cleaner, the smell of old pennies, made me wonder if everything was going to smell worse than it actually was. Did she have enough wood, Mom said. Grammy never let me check, never let Robbie check. Yeah, I told her. I kicked off my shoes, and through the hole in my sock, my big toe stuck out. I put it back in and hurried down the hallway to my room. Paige came out of hers and bumped into me. Jesus, she said, waving her hand in front of her nose. Grammy smoke you out over there? A little, I told her. Fully clothed, I crawled into bed, my muddy knees staining the white sheet. Paige was in my room, watching me over my bed when I woke. It felt like I'd slept forever, but I must not have, since Paige was here and not gone to work at the pawn shop. Jaguxis, she said, little shit. Are you okay? Maybe she saw the worry in my face, or maybe I just didn't look so fresh, like a butted cigarette or old jewelry, because she sat down on the bed and massaged my scalp. You don't feel well, she said. I shook my head. I no longer had a headache, but my stomach gurgled and it felt as if something moved about my insides. You're making a lot of noise in your sleep, Paige said. Did Mommy hear me, I asked. No, she's gone, Paige said. She's at Grammy's. Don't tell her, I said. Tell her what, she asked. Listen, just don't tell her. And then I pushed Paige aside and burped and gagged off the side of the bed. Paige grabbed the waist basket, but I told her no. It won't come out, I said. David, Paige said, you're freaking me out. Why are you sick? Listen, I said, and I told her what happened. Paige stopped rubbing my scalp and instead stared at me. Her face scrunched up like she was trying to make out something in the distance. I ended the story by asking, am I going to die? Paige laughed and shook her head. How many cigarettes did you smoke? I lost track after 14. 14, she said. Am I asked. No, she said. You just got pretty sick from the nicotine. Paige went to the kitchen and brought me back a ginger ale. Just sip it and burp, she said, and started for the door. Where are you going, I asked. To smoke a cigarette and get ready for work, she told me. While she smoked in the bathroom and combed her hair, the snapping of tiny brown knots, I sipped the ginger ale in bed. The condensation dripped off the can onto my shirt and seeped cold through the cotton onto my chest. Every few minutes, Paige came in and checked on me. She didn't speak, just nodded, and I nodded back. I had to pee already, and even though I was starting to feel better, I knew if I got up, my stomach would spin out of control. Mom came home, and Paige met her in the hallway. I could smell their smoking. Aren't you late, Mom said, and she didn't let Paige answer. Look what my mother gave me. 4 silver necklaces, this gold locket, this silver watch, and she stopped, rummaging through a paper bag. Look at these rings. How much do you think I could get? I can't pay you more just because you're my mother, Paige said. But the watch is in great condition, she said. It's stainless steel, Paige said. Mom crinkled the bag. I didn't think she liked Paige's job. Actually, I thought Mom hated that Paige had a job while Mom didn't. Paige came to say goodbye. She stood in my doorway wearing black pants and a red blouse. See you later, she said, and then she laughed and mouthed, feel better. When Paige was gone, Mom came down the hallway and into my room. Why are you in bed, Mom said. I was tired, I told her. Too tired to fill your grandmother's wood box? She said, never mind about the wood, I told Mom. Why are you fibbing? Grammy said you didn't even show up. Where were you? I sat up in bed and I felt nauseated. I was there, I told her. Grammy wasn't herself. Mom stared at me. She started up. Well, you should have listened to me and filled that wood box. The river may be thawed and running again, but it still gets cold at night. Was she okay when you saw her? I asked. She was sleeping when I got there, but I woke her up after I saw the wood box was empty. I sipped the ginger ale. Did you fill it for her? That's your job, she said. Get up. Really? Yes, really. It'll take 10 minutes. Mom left the doorway and went down the hall. I got up from the bed, the trapped feeling in my stomach loosening up and slipping out. I burped once, yet my nerves were shot. My legs shook. Something bad seemed to be my fault. I guessed it was the smoking. I didn't want Mom to know about it just in case she'd snap on me, or even worse, on Grammy. I couldn't do that to Grammy. My sheets were muddy and I covered the mess by making the bed. In the bathroom, I scrubbed the smell of smoke away until my hands were red. At the front door, Mom handed me a heavy garbage bag. Take this out too. She kissed the top of my head, opened the door for me, and sent me out. Frick was still working on the truck. As I passed him, he lay awkwardly in the passenger seat trying to disconnect something from under the glove compartment. Shit, he said. Fucking piece of shit. On the walk there, I kept trying to push from my mind the woman I'd met earlier, but I couldn't. I prepared for wickedness. Grammy's house was dark. The porch light was off, and the door was wide open. When I went inside, I made sure it clicked shut behind me. The only light, blue and white, that was shining came from the TV in the living room. Grammy sat in a recliner with her arms on the armrests, lit cigarette between her fingers, smoke coiling to the ceiling. Grammy, I said. Oh, chugook, she laughed. You scared me. I stepped into the living room. Mom told me to fill that wood box, I said. She won't stop about that damn wood box. Go ahead, I suppose. I went back outside and around the back of the house to where a dark green tarp covered a cord of wood. The tarp crinkled and dumped water when I lifted it. I stacked 7 logs of ash in my arms and carried the load back inside. The bark was digging at my forearm, and I felt a piece slipping loose, so I hurried down the hallway and came to the wood box. And as I got close to the wood box, the pieces just started to fall, but I lunged forward so all the wood fell directly out of my arms and banged and rattled into the box. That's how it goes, Grammy said. She smoked her cigarette. Don't carry so much next time. I filled the wood box in 2 trips. Well, I have to, Grammy cut me off. You eat? No, I said, I should get home and do that. I'll cook you something, she said. Go on, have a seat. I didn't want to stay, didn't want to be alone with her too long, but I decided to remain with her, and I was glad I did. She turned on more lights in the house, and I sat at the kitchen table, and she fired up the stove and fried me up 2 greasy eggs and drippy strips of bacon and 2 slices of toast with raspberry jam on it. And she told me a joke about a brown bear wiping its ass with a white rabbit. And after I ate the food, after I made her tell me the joke one more time, my laughter making her laugh, and after she took my plate and rinsed it and covered the dirty dishes with a cloth, as was our custom to tell the spirits to stay away, that there was no food for offering, she handed me a freezer-burnt orange creamsicle. And when she turned off all the lights and ushered me in front of the TV in the living room, I saw smoke, yeah, but I saw Grammy and myself under all of it hanging over us. She turned on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, but I wasn't really paying attention. I was trying to figure out in the dim lighting if my creamsicle was dripping over the plastic wrapper and onto the couch, and so I ate the creamsicle as fast as I could so as not to make a mess. My mouth was cold and numb. Grammy had her eyes partly open, dozing, a cigarette wasting away between her fingers like Mom. I turned my attention to the news, holding the wooden creamsicle stick and the wrapper in my hand. Peter Jennings was gearing up to a segment about NASA and Pioneer 10, how it sent its last signal, and how NASA had no plans to contact Pioneer 10. No plans. None. The metal ship was just going to keep on going out there in quiet glides of black. And since it was a thing, a machine, it couldn't see like us. And we way back here would never, ever know if the machine was okay. I wished that the near impossible would happen, that a passing space rock would collide with it, shatter it to pieces, and send it broken toward the stars. The news ended, and while the TV went black, I wondered when Grammy would send her last message. In her recliner, barely rocking, she snored, her cigarette ash long, bending, slipping from her fingers. I saw to it, plucked the cigarette from Grammy's fingers. When the ash fell to the carpet, I rubbed it in with my foot. I didn't set Grammy's smoke in the ashtray, but instead I held it, looking at the filter and the red coal dimly lit, and I thought how I could take some if I wanted to, could commit to it in a way that was immediately attainable and consequential. I put it to my lips. Grammy was looking at me. It was going to fall, I told her. I put out the cigarette in the ashtray. Waliwani, she said. Thank you. Grammy sat up, resituated herself in her recliner. Then she looked at the creamsicle wrapper and its dried wooden stick. Go on, she told me. Have another. Thank you. I'll stop there.
That was half the story, Morgan.
It was, yeah.
Boy, a lot of great things are happening in there. Cough, cough, sick. It is sensitive, multi-generational, character-driven fiction, and you are weaving in social reflection. I'm really staggered. Absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you, Troy. Yeah.
I didn't expect the spaceship at the end, out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've always been, I don't know, I've just always really been intrigued with like space just generally, like as like this weird thing that's just out there. And when you read my collection, I think you'll see this strange thread of spaceness. I don't know, it's just there.
Well, it fit. I mean, it belonged in the story. It was powerful piece of the story. Gosh, what a night we have had. Thank you so much, Morgan, for reading.
Thank you, Troy.
I will read your collections coming out by Tin House in July. And I hope we get to have you back next year to read again.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Morgan. If everyone's back, let's bring them up. Jenzo and Natalie. How was it, everyone?
Amazing.
A lot of fun.
I'm so glad. Natalie, did you know Morgan or Jenzo before this?
I was just saying, I've seen your guys' names, but no, we've never met. So yeah, happy to meet you.
Likewise, I've seen your name on like Twitter and Facebook and like Stone Coast related things.
The three of you made a great team. Thank you so much for sharing. And Jenzo, thank you for coming and joining us, Crazy Stone Coasters. Your work was brilliant.
Thank you. I mean, I felt in incredible company. So the pleasure and privilege is all mine. Thank you so much.
I'm glad. Just very quickly, as we close up, Amanda and I are not hosting the show next Sunday night. It's Thanksgiving weekend in the States. And the next 2 weeks, we're not sure, although we're open if people are interested. But December 2nd and December 9th, the official Stone Coast program, which is not what this is, this is just us, is hosting a reading for any alumni who've had a book published in the prior or this calendar year. So I saw there were 9 signups, and I think Jenny O'Connell, who works for Stone Coast and runs that, as Amanda and I help a little bit. We're really excited about it. So more info coming on that. Thank you again, all three of you, for reading. It was a wonderful night. Truly, I'm very inspired by your work ethic, your publication record. Make me so proud. I don't know why. Much love, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you.